My name is Clara Montgomery, and I am 28 years old. In the quiet, rain-washed city of Cedar Creek, where I've spent my entire life, I built a world for myself grounded in compassion, creativity, and the gentle art of healing. I work as an art therapist, helping children navigate the often turbulent waters of their emotions. It's a calling, a privilege to witness the moment a splash of color on paper can give voice to a feeling too big for words. My life, until recently, felt like one of my own carefully composed paintings, a landscape of soft hues and quiet corners, held together by a deep, abiding love for my fiancé, Julian, and the cherished memory of my grandmother. But a single, violent brushstroke can shatter a masterpiece. What should have been a joyful celebration of my future became the moment my past finally caught up with me. At my own engagement party, in a room filled with the people I loved most, my father slapped me across the face. The sound of it, sharp and ugly, sliced through the happy chatter, leaving a silence that was heavier than any shout. His reason? My refusal to hand over the $100,000 life foundation my grandmother had left me to rescue my brother, Leo, from his latest self-inflicted disaster. As I stood there, the sting on my cheek a blossoming fire, a profound and terrifying clarity washed over me. My family had always seen me as a resource, a safety net, but they had fundamentally misunderstood the strength of the threads they were trying to tear. This is the story of how I learned to untangle myself from a lifetime of expectation, and how, in the wreckage, I found the courage to reclaim not just my inheritance, but myself. Our family home, a handsome craftsman in a neighborhood of old maples and immaculate lawns, was a study in appearances. My father, Richard Montgomery, was a successful investment banker, a man who measured the world in profit margins and projected returns. My mother, Eleanor, was the perfect complement, elegant, socially adept, and fiercely protective of our family's pristine image. From the outside, we were the picture of Cedar Creek success. But inside those walls, the emotional economy was always unbalanced. My brother, Leo, 2 years my junior, was the sun around which our family universe orbited. From his birth, he was bathed in a golden light that never seemed to reach my corner of the room. As children, the discrepancies were small things I couldn't quite name. He received the praise for his effortless charm, while my quiet diligence was simply expected. His scraped knees were a family crisis. My straight-A report cards were met with a distracted, "That's nice, dear." As we grew, the favoritism sharpened into a blade. When I was 17, I saved for a year, working shifts at a local bookstore, to buy a beat-up old Subaru. It taught me independence, the satisfying weight of an achievement earned. 2 years later, on Leo's 17th birthday, a brand new Audi sat in the driveway, a gleaming testament to his inherent worthiness in our parents' eyes. "He just has so much potential, Clara," my mother would say, as if potential were a currency that negated the need for effort. The pattern solidified through our education. I navigated college with a patchwork of scholarships, student loans, and part-time jobs, earning my master's in art therapy with a quiet determination that felt like my own secret rebellion. Leo, meanwhile, drifted through a private business school on our parents' dime, changing his major twice and graduating with a C average and a portfolio of expensive hobbies. I graduated with debt and a sense of purpose. He graduated debt-free and deeply uncertain of what to do next. The only person who seemed to see the full picture was my grandmother, Genevieve. My father's mother, she was a woman carved from a different, stronger wood. A celebrated local artist, her paintings were vibrant, fierce, and full of life, just like her. She lived in a small cottage by the sea, the air thick with the scent of turpentine and salt. She saw the quiet grit beneath my compliant surface. "You have a spine of steel, my Clara," she told me once, as we sat on her porch watching the tide roll in. "Don't ever let them convince you it's a burden." Grandma Genevieve and I shared a language that the rest of my family didn't speak. It was a language of quiet understanding, of shared passions for art and nature, of a mutual respect for the kind of strength that doesn't need to announce itself. When she passed away 3 years ago, her will held a surprise that sent ripples through the family. She had left the bulk of her estate to charity, but she had set up a special trust for me, a $100,000 life foundation fund. The terms, drafted by her shrewd lawyer, were ironclad. The fund could only be accessed for a significant life event, the down payment on a first home or wedding expenses, and only with my sole, undisputed authorization. She always did have her favorites, my father had muttered grimly after the reading. My mother had simply looked wounded, as if my grandmother's final act was a personal slight. Leo, predictably, had seemed both resentful and entitled, as if a portion of it should have been his by default. For me, the fund was never just about the money. It was a final, loving message from my grandmother, a tangible affirmation of her belief in me. It was a foundation, not just for a house or a wedding, but for a life of my own making. I met Julian 4 years ago, not at a race, but at a community art project meant to revitalize a neglected downtown park. He was an urban planner, volunteering his time to help design the layout of the new green space. I was leading a children's mural workshop. I remember watching him, deep in conversation with a group of neighborhood kids, listening to their wild ideas for a playground with a genuine, unpatronizing interest. He had a stillness about him, a quiet confidence that was the antithesis of my father's blustering authority or my brother's performative charm. He approached me later, a smudge of green paint on his cheek, and asked about my work. We talked for over an hour, surrounded by the joyful chaos of children and paint. His passion for creating beautiful, sustainable spaces for people to live and connect in mirrored my own belief in the healing power of creative expression. When he asked for my number, saying yes felt like the most natural thing in the world. Julian's family was a revelation. His parents, Maria and David, lived in a modest, book-filled home where the front door was always open and the coffee pot was always on. Their dinners were filled with easy laughter, genuine curiosity about one another's lives, and an unconditional acceptance that felt like a warm blanket. They welcomed me not as Julian's girlfriend, but as Clara. They asked about my work, admired my art, and listened, truly listened, when I spoke. With them, I felt seen in a way I never had with my own family. My parents' reaction to Julian was predictably lukewarm. He wasn't in finance. His family had no significant social standing. He seems like a nice young man, my mother had offered after their first meeting, the faint praise a condemnation in itself. But is urban planning a stable career? My father was more direct, peppering Julian with questions about his salary and career trajectory, as if he were vetting a portfolio rather than meeting his daughter's partner. I stopped trying to defend him. Julian's quiet dignity was defense enough. As my relationship with Julian deepened, the chasm between me and my family widened. Phone calls became terse, dutiful check-ins. Family dinners were fraught with tension, as I navigated my father's subtle jabs about Julian's profession and my mother's passive-aggressive remarks about my modest lifestyle. Meanwhile, Leo continued his pattern of professional failure. Our parents funded a string of ill-conceived startups, a gourmet food truck, a subscription box for artisanal dog toys, a tech venture with a vague premise, all of which collapsed within a year. The blame was always external. A bad market, unreliable partners, a weak economy. Never Leo. Each failure was cushioned by another injection of our parents' money. A few months before Julian proposed, I ran into my cousin, Maya, at a farmer's market. She had always been one of the few relatives who saw through the family facade. "Have you spoken to Leo lately?" she asked, her expression clouded with worry. "Not really," I admitted. "Why?" She hesitated, lowering her voice. "I heard from my mom he's gotten into some risky investments. Dad's really worried about him. Something about gambling." The news landed with a thud of grim familiarity. Leo had always chased the easy win. I made a mental note to ask my mother about it, but life, busy and full with Julian and my work, intervened. Julian proposed on the anniversary of the day we met, in the now thriving park we had helped create. We were sitting on a bench beneath the shade of a maple tree, watching the very children we'd worked with years ago play on the equipment they'd helped design. "Clara," he said, his voice soft and earnest. "You've taught me what true strength is. It's not about being the loudest person in the room. It's about quiet conviction, about deep compassion. I love the world you're building, for yourself and for the children you help. I want to build my world with you. He got down on one knee, and the ring he offered was as perfect and thoughtful as he was, a simple, elegant sapphire, the color of the deep sea by my grandmother's cottage, flanked by two small, ethically sourced diamonds. Through happy tears, I said yes. As he slid the ring onto my finger, a feeling of profound peace settled over me. This was my foundation. This was real. That night, we celebrated with champagne in our small apartment and began to dream about our wedding. Something small, Julian suggested immediately. Just the people who really know and love us. I was hoping you'd say that, I said, relieved. And we can use Grandma Genevieve's fund. We can create something beautiful, something that's truly us, without starting our life together in debt. Julian, who knew the complex history of the fund, squeezed my hand. She would have loved that. Using her gift to celebrate your happiness. Our vision took shape quickly, an intimate ceremony for 60 or 70 people at a beautiful, light-filled art gallery overlooking the water. Good food, live jazz, and a celebration of love, not a performance for society. When I called my mother to share our news, her reaction was telling. Her first question wasn't about the ring or the proposal, but about the money. So you'll be using Genevieve's trust fund, then? She asked, her tone carefully neutral. Yes, Mom. That's what it was for. A pause stretched between us. Well, your father and I were hoping to speak with you about that. Leo, he's had some setbacks with his latest business venture. We were thinking, perhaps, you could have a simpler wedding and help him out. Just a loan, of course. A cold dread spread through my stomach. Mom, the trust is legally structured. The money can only be used for wedding expenses. There are always ways around these things, Clara, she insisted. Family helps family. I ended the call feeling sick, the joy of my engagement suddenly tainted. We decided to hold the engagement party at Julian's parents' home. Maria was ecstatic, immediately bustling with plans. It would be comfortable, warm, and, I hoped, a neutral territory. When I gave my mother the details, she sighed. Well, we'll have to bring Leo, naturally, she said. And he's seeing a new girl, Tiffany. It would be rude not to include her. I hadn't wanted Leo there at all, but I relented. Fine. But please, Mom. This is our celebration. I don't want any drama. Of course not, dear, she said, her voice a little too bright. The night before the party, I dreamt my wedding dress was woven from heavy, wet ropes, pulling me down, anchoring me to the spot. I woke up with a sense of foreboding I couldn't shake. It's just pre-party nerves, Julian reassured me, wrapping his arms around me. Tonight is about us. Nothing will ruin it. I tried to believe him. I spent the day getting ready, choosing a simple, deep blue silk dress that matched my ring. I fastened my grandmother's silver earrings, another small treasure she had left me, and took a deep breath, looking at my reflection. This is your night, I told myself. Don't let anyone take it from you. If only I had known. Julian's parents' backyard was a fairy tale. Maria had strung fairy lights through the branches of their enormous oak tree, casting a magical glow over tables dressed in white linen and adorned with mason jars of wildflowers. David had built a small, rustic arch from reclaimed wood, where Julian and I stood to greet our guests. It's perfect, I whispered to Maria, hugging her tightly. Only the best for my new daughter, she said, her eyes warm and kind. You make our son so happy, Clara. Friends arrived in a happy stream, Julian's sister with her family, his college friends, my colleagues from the therapy center. The air filled with laughter and the clinking of glasses. The love in that yard was palpable, a protective bubble I desperately wanted to stay inside. Then my family arrived. My father, stiff and uncomfortable in a suit that was too formal for the occasion, surveyed the scene with a critical eye. My mother was wearing a cocktail dress that belonged at a charity gala, not a backyard party. Leo trailed behind them, looking anxious, with a woman I assumed was Tiffany clinging to his arm. She was all sharp angles and expensive labels, her eyes darting around as if assessing the value of the decorations. Congratulations, darling, my mother said, kissing the air beside my cheek. What a quaint party. My father gave me a rigid hug. Congratulations, he mumbled, before turning to Julian with a firm, proprietary handshake. You'll take good care of my girl. We take good care of each other, sir, Julian replied, his grace a stark contrast to my father's aggression. Tiffany stepped forward, her smile overly bright. So nice to finally meet you. Leo's told me so much about you. I love your dress. Is it a designer? Thank you, I said, forcing a smile. It's from a small boutique downtown. Her face fell almost imperceptibly. Oh, well, it's still lovely. I was just telling Leo, when we get engaged, I want a big destination wedding. Maybe Italy. I saw Leo flinch. My father cleared his throat loudly. Let's get a drink, shall we? He said, steering them toward the bar. As the evening wore on, I watched my father chain-smoke cigarettes and down glass after glass of whiskey. He and Leo would periodically retreat to the edge of the lawn for hushed, intense conversations, their faces growing more strained with each passing minute. Despite the undercurrent of tension, the party was beautiful. Our friends gave funny, heartfelt toasts. Julian's father spoke movingly about partnership and building a life together. To Clara and Julian, he finished, raising his glass. May you always find a home in each other's hearts. Then Julian took my hand. For years ago, he began, a smile playing on his lips. I met the most incredible woman while covered in paint. Clara, you have a quiet strength that could move mountains. You see the best in people, and you help them see it in themselves. I can't wait to spend my life building beautiful things with you. As our friends applauded, I saw my father lean over and whisper something urgently to my mother. She shook her head, looking distressed. Leo was staring at his feet, his face flushed. I should have recognized the signs of an impending storm, but I was so wrapped up in the warmth of Julian's love, in the support of our chosen family. Just as Maria brought out a gorgeous cake, my father was suddenly beside me, his breath soured with whiskey. We need to talk, he hissed in my ear. About that fund. My stomach plummeted. Dad, not now. This isn't the place. He grabbed my arm, his fingers digging in. Yes. Now. Julian was there in an instant. Is everything all right, Richard? It's fine, I said quickly, trying to smooth things over, a lifetime of conditioning kicking in. Dad and I just need a minute. I followed him to a secluded corner of the yard, where Leo was already waiting, the picture of misery. And that's when my carefully constructed world shattered. My father didn't bother to lower his voice. You're going to transfer that fund to Leo, he said, his words slightly slurred. He needs it. Your brother is in serious trouble. I stared at him, dumbfounded. What? No. I can't. It's for my wedding. It's legally protected. Legal matters can be managed, he snapped, the investment banker looking for a loophole. He owes a great deal of money, Clara. To very unpleasant people. I turned to Leo, who refused to meet my gaze. What is he talking about? Leo mumbled, I made some bad bets. It got out of hand. He gambled it away, my father cut in impatiently. Nearly $100,000. The point is, he's family, and he needs this money. Don't be so selfish, Clara, my mother's voice added. She had followed us, her face a mask of anxious persuasion. You and Julian can have a simple ceremony at the courthouse. A wedding is just one day. The argument had drawn an audience. The joyful chatter of the party had died down, replaced by a tense silence. I could see Julian watching, his expression darkening with concern. This isn't about the wedding, I said, my voice shaking but firm. This is about you, once again, expecting me to sacrifice everything for Leo. You have been doing this my entire life. My father's face turned a mottled red. That's enough out of you. You will call the trustee tomorrow and you will authorize the transfer. Family comes first. Something inside me, a cord that had been stretched taut for 28 years, finally snapped. No, I said. The word was quiet, but it echoed in the sudden stillness. I will not. He took a step closer, his shadow falling over me. What did you say? I lifted my chin, meeting his furious gaze. I said no. Grandma left that money to me. She knew. She knew you would do exactly this. I am sorry Leo is in trouble, but I will not set myself on fire to keep him warm. Not this time. You ungrateful little brat, he roared. You'll give him the money or this engagement is off. The entire party was now watching, frozen. Julian was moving toward us, his face set like stone. Sir, he said, his voice dangerously calm. You need to step back. My father ignored him, his eyes boring into me. Well? What is it, Clara? Your brother or your little party? I looked him dead in the eye. The fund is mine. And I am marrying Julian. Leo's problems are his to solve. I didn't see the blow coming, but I felt it. It wasn't a closed fist, but an open-handed slap, hard and fast. The crack of his hand against my cheek was a sound of finality. My head snapped to the side and a sharp, stinging pain erupted across my face. A collective gasp rippled through our guests. I tasted the coppery tang of blood where my teeth had cut the inside of my lip. The world tilted for a moment as I absorbed the brutal, undeniable truth. My father had just struck me. Julian lunged forward, placing himself between me and my father as his own dad, David, rushed to help restrain the enraged man who was still shouting about my ingratitude. I straightened up slowly, my legs trembling but holding. I touched my cheek, then brought my fingers to my mouth and looked at the smear of blood on their tips. A strange, cold calm settled over me. This was it. The point of no return. My mother was sobbing, pleading with everyone to calm down. Leo looked stricken, rooted to the spot in horror. Tiffany, I saw with a flash of disgust, was filming the entire scene on her phone until Julian's sister calmly walked over and took it from her hand. Clara, please, my mother wept. He didn't mean it. He's just so stressed. I looked at her, and all the years of quiet resentment coalesced into a single, painful moment of truth. He meant it, Mom. He's always meant it. Leo comes first. I don't even register. The yard was utterly silent. I turned to face our guests, my voice surprisingly steady. I am so sorry you all had to witness this. But maybe it's for the best. Now everyone sees the truth. My father, still struggling against David's grip, sneered. Always so dramatic. Just like your grandmother. Thank you, I said, and the words felt like my own. That's the kindest thing you've ever said to me. And with that, I turned my back on them, took Julian's steady hand, and walked away, leaving the ruins of my old life scattered behind me on the perfectly manicured lawn. Julian led me into the house, into the quiet sanctuary of the guest bathroom. He gently dabbed at my bleeding lip with a damp cloth, his own hands trembling with suppressed rage. My cheek was already starting to swell and throb, the imprint of my father's hand a hot brand on my skin. The physical pain, however, was a dull echo of the profound emotional violence that had been inflicted. We should get you to an urgent care clinic, Julian said, his voice tight. You might need a stitch. I met my own eyes in the mirror. My hair was disheveled, my dress rumpled, my makeup smeared. But through the shock and the emerging bruise, my gaze was clear. The woman looking back at me was not a victim. She was a survivor, and she was done being silent. Outside, we could hear the party dissolving into chaos. Maria knocked softly on the door. Clara, honey? One of your friends, a woman from your clinic, called the police. They're here. Of course. An assault is an assault, even when the perpetrator is your father. When we stepped out of the bathroom, 2 police officers were standing in the living room. My father was slumped in an armchair, looking sullen and bewildered, as if he couldn't comprehend being held accountable. My mother was fluttering around him, weeping. Most of our friends had gathered on the front porch, giving us space, but radiating silent support. Ma'am, one of the officers, a kind-faced woman, said to me. I'm Officer Sanchez. We need to take your statement. And we need to know if you wish to press charges. Charges? My mother's head snapped up. Clara, no. He's your father. I looked at her, at the woman whose primary instinct was to protect her husband from the consequences of his violence against her daughter. A father, I said, my voice quiet but unyielding, doesn't hit his child for refusing to be a bank. Officer Sanchez led me to the dining room table. With Julian by my side, his hand a warm, steady presence on my back, I recounted the entire evening, from my parents' initial demand for the money to the final, violent confrontation. Yes, I said, my voice clear and resolved. I want to press charges. Watching them handcuff my father was surreal. He protested loudly that it was a private family matter, a misunderstanding. My mother followed them out to the squad car, her pleas echoing in the night air. After they were gone, Leo approached me, his face ashen. "Clara, I'm so sorry. I didn't think." "Not now, Leo," I said, cutting him off, my capacity for his excuses utterly depleted. "I need to go." Julian's parents insisted on driving us to the clinic, where a doctor put a single, neat stitch in my lip and checked me for a concussion. "It takes immense courage to do what you did," she told me gently as she documented my injuries for the police report. Back in the sanctuary of our small apartment, the adrenaline finally ebbed away, leaving a crushing weight of grief and shock. I collapsed onto the sofa and sobbed for the father I never had, for the mother who couldn't protect me, for the loss of a family I had loved in spite of everything. Julian simply held me, letting me break so I could begin to piece myself back together. My phone was a minefield of notifications. Texts from friends expressing love and support. Messages from Julian's family, wrapping me in their warmth from afar. And then there were the others. A barrage of texts from my mother, veering wildly from guilt. "How could you do this to our family?" To desperation. "Please, Clara, drop the charges, you'll ruin him." A long, rambling text from Leo, full of self-pitying apologies. Even a few from distant aunts and uncles, chiding me for airing our dirty laundry in public. But there was one from my cousin, Maya, that stood out. "I heard what happened. I'm on your side, 100%. What he did was monstrous. I told your mother as much. Call me for anything." I shut off my phone. I couldn't absorb anymore. "What are you thinking?" Julian asked softly, handing me a cup of chamomile tea. I took a shaky breath. "I'm thinking," I said, "that my grandmother didn't leave me a trust fund. She left me a lifeboat. And tonight, my father tried to sink it with everyone in it." I looked at Julian, my partner, my true family. "I'm also thinking this is just the beginning. They're not going to give up on that money. Whatever happens," he said, his gaze unwavering, "you are not alone in this." In that moment, cradled in the safety of our shared home, I felt the first stirrings of a new kind of strength. It wasn't the quiet, enduring strength I'd cultivated my whole life. This was something sharper, fiercer. It was the strength of a boundary being drawn, not in sand, but in stone. The following days were a blur of legalities and emotional excavation. Julian's father connected us with a lawyer, a sharp, compassionate woman named Evelyn Reed who specialized in family law and trust litigation. When she saw the fading bruise on my cheek, her professional demeanor hardened with a protective fire. "Let's start with the trust," she said, after I'd recounted the story. She reviewed the documents my grandmother had drafted. "Genevieve was a very wise woman," Evelyn remarked. "This is one of the most airtight trusts I've ever seen. The coercion clause is particularly brilliant." She anticipated this. Then Evelyn uncovered something that made me feel physically ill. At her request, the trust's administrator ran a full audit. It revealed that my father, using his professional credentials, had made 3 separate attempts over the past year to have himself declared a co-trustee, citing my financial inexperience. Each time, he had been firmly rebuffed by the trust's unshakable terms. The engagement party hadn't been a spontaneous act of desperation. It was the culmination of a long, calculated campaign to seize my inheritance. On Evelyn's advice, I also started seeing a therapist, Dr. Anya Sharma, who specialized in family systems. In our first session, she gave me the vocabulary for my life's experience. "You're describing a classic, golden child and scapegoat dynamic, Clara," she explained. "It's a common pattern in narcissistic family structures. The scapegoat exists to carry the family's shame and absorb its dysfunction, allowing the golden child and the parents to maintain their perfect image." The words were like a key turning in a lock I didn't even know was there. I wasn't difficult or selfish or ungrateful. I was playing a role I had never auditioned for. Pressing charges, Dr. Sharma told me, wasn't an act of revenge. It was an act of profound self-liberation. About 2 weeks after the party, Leo asked to see me. We met at a neutral coffee shop. He looked gaunt and exhausted. "I didn't know Dad was trying to get on the trust," he said, his voice raw. "I swear, Clara. I knew he was trying to find a way to get me the money, but I had no idea he was going after you like that." "What kind of trouble are you in, Leo?" I asked, my voice devoid of its usual sisterly softness. He finally confessed everything. It wasn't just bad bets, it was a full-blown gambling addiction, with debts to dangerous loan sharks. He'd been hiding the severity of it for over a year. For the first time, I saw him not as the favored son, but as a man-child, emotionally stunted by a lifetime of being shielded from consequences. Our parents' favoritism had been a poison for him, too. "I can't help you, Leo," I said, and the words were freeing. "Not with the money. It's legally impossible, but more than that, it wouldn't help you. It would just be another bailout. You need real help." To my astonishment, he nodded, his eyes filling with tears. "I know. I started going to Gamblers Anonymous meetings last week." It was the first step he'd ever taken on his own. It wasn't a resolution, but it was a beginning. In the midst of the chaos, Julian and I made a decision. We were still getting married, but we would reclaim the celebration as our own. We canceled the gallery and, with a portion of my grandmother's fund, booked a small, beautiful venue, a historic lighthouse on the coast, with a windswept garden overlooking the ocean. It felt right, a beacon of light after a storm. And with the considerable remainder of the fund, we did something that felt like the truest tribute to my grandmother's spirit. Working with Evelyn, we established the Genevieve Montgomery Foundation, a nonprofit dedicated to providing grants for women seeking to escape abusive family situations and build independent lives. We were turning my pain into a legacy of hope. The day of my father's court hearing was gray and drizzling, the sky mirroring my own somber mood. Faced with irrefutable evidence, dozens of witnesses, medical records, and the video from Tiffany's phone, he pled guilty to misdemeanor assault. The judge sentenced him to probation, a fine, and mandatory enrollment in an anger management program. A restraining order was also put in place. As we left the courthouse, my mother approached me, her face pale and etched with a pain I couldn't decipher. "Are you happy now, Clara?" she asked, her voice trembling. "You've destroyed his reputation." "He destroyed his own reputation, Mom," I said sadly. "All I did was tell the truth." She flinched, and for the first time, I saw something other than defensiveness in her eyes. I saw confusion. I saw a crack in the foundation of her reality. "I don't know how to fix this," she whispered. "Maybe you can't," I said gently. "Maybe you just have to start by seeing it for what it is." It was not forgiveness, not yet. But it was the first honest conversation we'd had in my adult life. Our wedding day arrived on a wave of crisp, salty air. The sun shone brightly, glinting off the calm sea. We had only 30 guests, our closest friends, Julian's family, my cousin Maya, and, sitting in a chair at the back, alone, my mother. I had invited her on one condition, that she came to witness, not to renegotiate. Leo had also asked to attend, and I had agreed. He looked healthier, clearer, and he met my eye with a look of quiet, respectful sorrow. As I stood in the small room at the base of the lighthouse, about to walk down the aisle I had created for myself, there was a soft knock on the door. It was Julian's father, David. "I hope I'm not overstepping," he said, his kind eyes crinkling at the corners. But I was thinking, a woman as strong as you shouldn't have to walk alone. But if you'd like an arm to lean on, just for support, I would be deeply honored. Tears sprang to my eyes. In that moment, he offered me the fatherly love I had always craved. "I'd like that very much, David," I said. The ceremony was perfect. We said our vows as the seabirds called overhead, the lighthouse standing sentinel behind us. At the simple reception in the garden, my mother approached me, holding a small, velvet-wrapped box. "This was your grandmother's," she said, her voice thick. "She wanted you to have it on your wedding day. I should have given it to you sooner." Inside was a delicate silver bracelet. From it hung a single, intricately detailed charm, a lighthouse. "She always said you were her beacon," my mother whispered, finally meeting my gaze. "She was so proud of the light you carried." And for the first time since that terrible night, I hugged my mother. It was a fragile, tentative embrace, Not a promise of restoration, but a gesture of possibility. Later, as Julian and I had our first dance, the lighthouse beams sweeping across the darkening sky, I thought about the journey. The money had been the catalyst, but the real inheritance was the strength I had found to claim my own life. The storm had passed, and in its wake, it had washed away everything that wasn't real, leaving only the bedrock of a future I was now free to build. It was a future defined not by expectation or obligation, but by a quiet, resilient, and deeply cherished love. And as I looked at the man holding me, at the loving faces surrounding us, and at the lighthouse standing tall against the vast ocean, I knew I was finally, truly home.